Staying on the topic of education in private schools, why are private schools not required to adhere to the same rules, regulations as public schools are mandated by state law, since the public schools are receiving my tax dollars, which requires certain amount of adherence?
I can kick that one off here. I mean, this is just going to be a philosophical difference, right? I know people on both sides, there's never going to be any bridge in the middle. What I would say is this, is historically, private schools have always received public tax dollars, different form, but whether it be tuition textbook credit, transportation sharing, I think that people, there's a lot of public awareness that wasn't there prior to the 2023 bill that there's a lot of support for private schools for public tax dollars. Now, when ESAs comes on board, one of the reasons for ESAs was not to create private schools and public schools, was to give people choice, right? There's a lot of choices out there, and that was the part of education reform. Now, I know some people have different viewpoints, and they're totally fine with their opinion there, but from a legislative body, and this was campaigned on for 3 years, ever since 2021, this was the central campaign issue in 2022, was coming out of COVID. We want to make sure that parents had the opportunity to get the best education that they deemed appropriate for their children. And so born out of that was the ESA. And I know that some people will just never like that. Some people are going to take that to the end of the road and say it's the best thing ever. We'll walk out of there and find out differences, right? But what we did was say, whether it be a charter school, which public schools do have charter schools out there, homeschool, private school, that people pay taxes, and in that quest to give their kids the best educational choice that they deem appropriate, to let them keep some of their tax money and support that education option. Now, when it comes to why not the same standards, well, we didn't do the ESA program, and we haven't started this charter school effort just to have all schools end up becoming the same thing in the end, right? That's the beauty of a diverse education system here in Iowa, is we want to get custom tailored to what the parents think best for their kids. You start slapping all the same rules and all these things, and there should be some minimum standards. I'm not saying that, but I think this, some of the public dialogue out there, I guess, kind of perplexes me a little bit, because what would be the point of giving these other education opportunities the opportunity if we're just going to essentially, in the end, make everyone a public school in the end? I think it's probably counterproductive, and there's a reason. And if parents take their kids to a different school, a private or a charter or, homeschool, and, well, maybe not necessarily homeschool, but maybe some of the micro schools out there, right? If those standards really do raise the quality of education that these other schools don't, well, then they're going to take their kids back to the public school. I mean, that's the point of the system. No one is getting forced into anything. And eventually, hopefully, rising tide raises all boats. And that's what we want to see here in the state, a little competition. Have everyone work a little bit harder in all these aspects we just talked about and raise our education standards.
Matt, I'll give you the last word since I went last time. I'm going to sound like a broken record again on this one. I've been pretty clear. I'm for public dollars staying with public schools. Again, I have nothing against private schools. I actually went to private school myself for 3 years when I was in middle school, because I was bullied so badly when I was in public school for a bit. So they serve a valuable purpose. However, I don't think that we should be giving hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, at this point, I think from the most recent metric that I've seen was 85% of the families and individuals that are getting the ESAs we're already in private schools, especially now that we've taken the cap off. I mean, essentially we're allowing taxpayers to pay for the richest families in the state to go to private schools. They are here though now, and so now I think to some degree, we need to shift the conversation of, now that they're here, how do we make this better, or look at some of the issues that were created. One of the big ones for me is the lack of an anti-discrimination policy that's in place. That these private schools, if they're going to take public dollars, then I think they should be required to take individuals with a 504 plan, or individuals with disabilities, or not be able to discriminate against you just because you maybe believe in a different sect or religion. I also think that we should have some level of oversight on the funding. I think that it's important that if we're going to give them public dollars, to make sure that that's going to the education services and not just to buy new football equipment or things of that nature. I also think that it's important that we look at maybe capping on the tuition, or we've heard from around the state that they've grandfathered in a previous amount to the former students, and now to the new students they're charging even more. And so if they're going to be here and they're going to be taking our taxpayer dollars, and I think that they should be held to somewhat of the same standards, the same regulations, the same oversight is what we require from our public schools.
I'd like to point out that for any private school that is receiving ESA dollars, number one, those are accredited private schools, just like your public schools are accredited by the Department of Education. So there is oversight in that regard. As far as how the dollars flow through, this is not a system where somebody gets a check and then goes out and spends it how they choose to. The parents have to apply for the education savings account to the school, private school that they're choosing to send their student to, and then those dollars flow from the state directly to the school. It never goes into the parent's hand. And the first thing that has to be paid for is tuition. Then after that, there are other educational needs that if the tuition is not taking up the entire education savings account, that it can be utilized for. The other thing that I'll point out is what we've done with ESAs is a small fraction of what we put into public education. In our $9.4 billion budget that we're proposing this year, over half of that $9.4 billion, and that's just your income taxes, your sales taxes, your use taxes, over half of the $9.4 billion goes into education. Everything else comes after that. HHS, Medicaid, public safety, you name it. Every other aspect of the state budget comes secondary to what we're putting in to our K-12 institutions, our region institutions, and our community colleges. So just keep that in mind. Over half of $9.4 billion has been the commitment that we've made to public education and secondary education. Those are your tax dollars, folks. Those are going to help make the best and brightest future for the next generation. So we're continuing to make the investment. And in the time that I've been in the majority since 2011, House Republicans have never cut education funding, not once. Last time education funding got cut was in 2010 under a Democrat trifecta. Since Republicans have been in control, we have increased education funding to the tune of over $1 billion, all right? And right now, just do the math, $9.4 billion in the overall state budget. Over half is going to education. And we increased public education dollars by over $1 billion since that time. So keep that in mind. We are funding your priorities. We are funding the next generation, and we are trying to help our K-12 institutions be the best places they can be for the education of our students.
Just a quick follow-up to my good friend, Leader Windschitl. We are friends, legitimately. Just one little bit of context, though, is remember that we are spending in Iowa about $1,200 less than the national average per pupil, right? We have dropped from #1 in public education down to whatever we are now, I think 22 to 24. Also, additionally, if you look at our funding increase versus inflation, and I had my clerk go through there and do this since Republicans taken over, because you are correct, the last time that we cut it was under Colbert, that was under a Democrat administration. However, if you look at the funding increase versus inflation, it's looking about like a 6.5% decrease. So I think that that's important for the overall context.